Hello, my name is Jesse Hauser. I'm an ERP consultant with Acunet. Today I'm going to be walking through the finance workspace in Acumatica and showing you how to perform many of the basic general ledger processes within the system. Some topics we'll look at your financial calendar and managing financial periods. We'll look at the chart of accounts and sub-accounts. We'll look at journal transactions and posting transactions originating from other modules. Then we'll look at some examples of GL reports and inquiries, as well as the financial statements. And then lastly, we'll look at creating and modifying budgets. This is the finance or general ledger workspace in Acumatica. This is what the menu looks like. I'm going to click Show All to expand and see all the options. I'm not going to click on every screen during this video, but I'm going to try to show you the key ones and walk through some of the basic processes. So first, let's look at our financial calendar. And this is where you generate your periods for the next financial year. So I've already created periods through 2023 in this demo environment. But if I want to create, if I'm ready to create 2024, I put that year in, I click Generate Calendar. I could select a range, so I can do multiple periods at once, or multiple years at once, but I'm just going to do one in this case. And then it creates all my periods for 2024. As you can see, they all have the status as inactive, so I have not opened them yet, I've just created them. To take actions such as opening and closing on my periods, I can go to Manage Financial Periods. And here I can look at the actions I can take. If I click Open, it'll show me any periods in the system that have been created but not yet opened. In that case, it's the ones that I just created. So if I wanted to open all of them for some reason, I could click Process All and it would just open all of them. But if I want to open a specific period or periods, I check the box next to it and then click Process. So I'm just opening period 1 to start. Then I can go to the Close action, and this will show me any periods within the year range that I've selected that are open and can be closed. So in this case, in my demo environment, I have basically all the periods still open. It's not a live environment, obviously. So if I select a bigger year range, it'll show me all the open periods for those 2 years, for example. But let's say I just want to close my earliest open period here. I could check that box and click Process. And it disappears from the list because it's no longer a period that I can take the close action on. If I go to lock, locking allows you to prevent posting to a close period. So if I'm an admin user or a user that's specifically authorized to do so, I can post to a closed period. Any other users cannot. But let's say I'm the controller and I'm an admin level user and I want to prevent even myself from, say, accidentally posting to a closed period. So I want to completely lock it down from all users. I can take the lock action. So I just want to lock this period here. It's already been closed, so your typical users cannot post to it, but if I'm an admin user, I can. So I want to lock it since I'm completely done with it. And again, it disappears from the list because it's already been locked. Deactivating. I created and opened this period earlier. Let's say I jump the gun and I'm not ready for it to be open and start posting to it. I can take the deactivate option. There's only one here, so I'm just going to click Process All. And it deactivates the period, so it's no longer open. I can reopen a closed period. I closed period 4 of 2013 earlier, but I can reopen it if I need to. And again, it disappears from the list. Unlocking, pretty self-explanatory. You can, if you've locked a period like we did earlier, you can unlock it if you need to be able to post to it again. And then it'll go back to the close status. So those are the basic actions you can take on this screen on your periods. Next, we'll look at the chart of accounts screen. This is where you manage your chart of accounts. I can create a new account by clicking here, specify an account number. If you're using account classes, you can specify the account class. Select your asset type, your account type. In this case, I'm just going to leave it as asset. Whether you want it to be active yet. I'll put in a description. Here I can, if need be, I can select a control account module. So this basically, for example, these are accounts receivable accounts. So if I want to only allow posting to these in the accounts receivable or AR module, I can select that like was done here. So if someone's putting in an AP bill and they try to use this account, it will not allow them to do so. So it's a way of restricting what your different accounts are used for to prevent those kind of issues. Now, if you want to allow manual entry to an account outside of the control account module, you can select this box, which will then allow manual entry outside of the module, but it will still give you a warning. In this case, I don't need to select a control account module, but you have that option. I'm going to select detailed posting, and then I'm going to go ahead and click save and see how it bounced up to the correct order. Now, if an account has transaction history in it, so things have been posted to it, you cannot delete it because then you would have orphaned records. But in this case, I just created it. I've never posted to it, and let's say I changed my mind or it was a mistake, I can delete it. And it should disappear. There it goes. I'll just click save to save that. Now, if for any accounts that have transaction history, if you don't want to allow posting to it anymore, you're no longer going to use it, it's just going to be to keep the historical records, you can inactivate it like so. And then if you change your mind, you can reactivate it. A couple other things over here. I won't hit on everything, but these are specified as cash accounts by this checkbox here. So that means that they can be used in the cash management module for cash transactions. You have to specify a currency for those accounts. And if it's a foreign currency, you select the rate to be used for revaluation. So that's the basic gist of managing your chart of accounts. Let's look at sub-accounts. Similar idea here. I can create a new one. I'm going to hit F3, which brings up my options for the first segment. So this is a 2-segment sub-account. This is telling me the first segment is the product group. So I'm going to select consumer goods. If I hit F3 again on my keyboard, it will show me the second segment, which is department, and I'm going to select finance. I had to make sure I selected one that didn't already exist. I'm not going to worry about a description right now. I'm just going to save. And there it is here. Again, I can delete it since I have not used it. And This is obviously a 2 segment sub account. You can have more segments if you would like, or no segments at all. You can specify the length and what those segments means. Segment means that that's specified during setup in the segmented keys. So that's sub accounts. Next, we'll look at the journal transactions screen. So this is showing me all my past journal transactions, the module that they came from. So these originated in the GL. These ones here came from AP, so I'm just seeing the GL batch that was generated when those AP transactions were released. I'm going to walk through making a manual journal entry. So for my transaction date, that defaults in from my working date here. If I change that to say June 28th, it will change the default transaction date. So whatever you have specified up here will default in when you're generating transactions. But then you can also change it here if you want. And the period defaults in based on the date. So since I'm using a calendar year, if it's the date's in June, it'll default in June as the period. I'm just going to go ahead and change this back before I forget. Not that it makes a big difference since this is just a demo environment. Oh. Okay, and then I'll put in a description. And I'll enter a detail line. Put a sub account. I'm going to have to put in a project because I have projects turned on in the system, but I'm just going to use the non-project code. And it already defaulted in my credit amount. I'm just going to save this and release. Now, one feature we have here is you can copy a transaction. So if you're making an entry that you made before, maybe you're making it the following month, whatever, you can copy a past one and then paste it. So it pastes everything in, the detail, also the transaction date and post period will paste in the same. So if you're making it for the next month, you can copy and paste, but then you'll want to change your transaction date or period, whatever. So like if I'm making this one for August, change that, but then the detail will all be the same. Then I can release it. You can also export just the detail on the grid here. And it should generate an Excel file. Which I just opened. So there's what it exported, just those 2 lines. Now I'm going to create a new entry, and then what you can do is you can upload an Excel file. Now you might be doing a complex journal entry and you do it in Excel and then you want to upload it into Acumatica after you've done the work in Excel. In this case, I'm just importing something that I just finished exporting from Acumatica just for simplicity's sake. So I'm going to upload that. And here's where you map the Excel columns to the columns in Acumatica. In this case, the names are all the same because I just exported it from Acumatica, but if the names are different, you can use this drop down and selector to map the fields if they're not, the names aren't quite the same, and Acumatica can't do it for you. But in this case, everything was the same, so it did. So there, it just imported those 2 lines, and then I can release it, and that's it. There are some actions here. There's a reverse action I can take. So if I click reverse, See what it just did there? It created a new GL entry and it just flipped the debit and credit. So when I do that, I'm not modifying the um, original entry because you can't modify something that I've already posted. But what it does is it just creates a reverse entry. See, it says new there. This is a new entry. If I save, it gives it a new batch number, and it just gives you an entry that's the reverse of what you just did. So it does it for you instead of having to do it manually. So then I can release that if I want to reverse the transaction. There's also, let me go to a better example for this. I'm going to look at just GL and let's do this one here. So here's a past entry. Let's say I pick the wrong accounts. For example, when I made this entry, I can do a reclassify. So let's say this top line, I didn't want to pick this account. I meant to do this one. So instead of doing a manual reversing entry to correct that, I can just do the reclassify. And so since I changed this one, it checks that box. So it'll move it. It'll create a journal transaction to make this adjustment for me. And I'm just going to click process. And so there's the reclassification batch number, so I can go look at that one later if I want to. So now I'm just seeing the three lines that I didn't take an action on. There's some other options here. I can do load and load transactions to the screen based on the criteria that I specify here, and then take action on them. Replace. Here you can find transactions that match this criteria and then replace things like the account or the branch to correct entries that were done incorrectly. So it's kind of a mass update. There's also split. So let's say for this line here, I put it all to 10,200, but I meant to split it between two accounts. So what I can do is allocate a portion of it to, we'll just say this account here. And then I specify in this new amount, let's say I wanted 5,000 to go to that account. See how that amount just decreased, so it's going to make an adjustment for that. And that's all I want to change, so I'm just going to click process. So now if I go back to my journal transactions, so it didn't actually release those. They're balanced, so I'd have to go and release them. We can do that in a second. But see, there's the original, the 10,500, and then the 5,000 adjustment to reclassify it to the other account, to split it. So that's a good segue into, there's a release transaction screen. So here I can go, if I have transactions that were created but they weren't released, they're just in the balance status, they've been saved but they have not been released, I can release them here. So maybe I'm a manager and I need to be able to review transactions before they're released. I can do that in this screen and just release them en masse. In this case I only have 2. I can check a specific box and release, or I can just click release all. And now they're released. There's also the post-transaction screen. And here's where you would go to post transactions from different modules within the system. Basically, in Acumatica, you can specify in your settings whether you or not you want the GL batch to automatically post when you release the transaction or not. So for example, if you were releasing AR invoices. In the AR settings, you can specify whether or not you want that to hit the GL, to post the GL, or if you want it to just dump into this screen so you can have a little more control over what's hitting your GL. Typically, people just let it automatically release, but here I have a transaction from the cash management module that needs posted. So if that's the way I'm doing things, I can check the box, hit post, or post all. Next, we'll look at some reports and inquiries in this system. I want to start with account summary. So this just shows me all my accounts beginning and ending balance and the debit and credit total for the period. So it's basically like a trial balance in inquiry format. And the inquiries are nice because you can export them to Excel easily because it's already in that Excel grid format, and you don't have to worry about headers and all that getting in the way like you do if you export a report. I can select my period and ledger, account class, sub-account if I want to. And then if I want to see transaction detail for any of these lines, if I click on this one, for example, and then click account details, it'll take me to the account details inquiry, which shows me the transactions that took place during the period for that account. If I go a little further back, way further back, probably shouldn't have, there we go. Okay, so now it's showing me all the past transactions in this large period range. So that's an example of an inquiry. Let's look at a basic trial balance. Look at the trial balance detailed. So here I can I'll just leave the current period and go ahead and run it. So pretty standard trial balance report. Look at some financial statements. Let's look at a balance sheet. I'm going to go back a little bit, make sure I have data to show you, because I want to look at some transaction detail behind it. So here, if I click this tree, it shows me my different companies and branches. So I can click here, it shows me all the data for product company, and if I click branch, it changes. Or I can just go back to my consolidated report and see everything. These reports have hyperlinks, so I can drill down to see the detail, and I can go all the way down to the transaction detail. So this is showing me the detail by account and sub-account, but let's say I want to see, looks like I have detail for this period, so I'm going to click the sub-account, and there it shows me all the transaction detail for that period. And again, it's taking me to the account detail screen that we were on earlier. I can open up specific batches. So I'm going all the way down to the transaction detail. So in this case, there's an AR payment looks like, and this is the GL batch from that. And I can even go further. I should be able to look at the source document on the AR side. Yep, so there's my payment. So I'm going all the way from the financial statement to the AR document, which is pretty cool. The hyperlinks throughout the system in Acumatica save you a lot of time and make it easier to navigate. Let's look at a P&L. Let's look at the same period. So same idea here. Got my tree. I can adjust what I'm looking at. I can drill down, see more detail about sales revenue. There's all my transactions. So that's a couple examples of financial statements in the system. Next, we'll look at budgets. I'm going to open the budget screen. Actually, I'm going to start by looking at the budget configuration. Starting here will make it a little less confusing when we get into the budget. So this is where you create basically a budget tree um, if you want to. So if you want to have a basic budget where you don't have it's not like segmented, you don't need to do this. But what you can do is create nodes for your budget, and then you can specify who should have access. So to each of these nodes, you can kind of segment out your budgets. So if I click on this revenue accounts nodes, it can includes all my sales revenue or revenue accounts, purchasing, and then I've got my operating expenses. And then you can specify who within your company has the authority to create or modify each of those nodes. So in this case, in this demo environment, I have a budget tree configured. So now if I go to the budget screen, I'm going to put in 2023. And we're going to start creating a new budget. So if this tree were not here, you wouldn't be seeing this, you wouldn't be seeing this here. You could just add lines and create a simple budget with all the accounts together without being segmented like this. Or you could load an Excel sheet. We'll look at that, an example of that later. So I click on this node. Here's my revenue accounts, for example, and it's all zeros because I haven't added anything yet, but the tree's already there since I have that set up in this environment. So instead of uploading something or putting in numbers myself, I do have the option to preload records, preload articles. And so what I can do is load records from like a different year or a different ledger, and then make an adjustment to them. So say like 115, so that would be increasing everything by 15%. So I'm going to click next. So it's bringing everything in. I don't have a lot of detail here. Let's try this. Let's go to 2022. There we go. So I'm bringing in last year's numbers from the actual ledger, and I'm going to increase it by 15% just as an example, and it brings in those numbers. Yep, so that's an option that you can do. Let's go back again. Okay, we're just gonna start over. Okay, we'll go back to my revenue accounts. So I can also just go ahead and put in amounts. I can type things in manually. Just a couple examples. And then I can distribute those So I can sets my annual amount, and I can distribute it evenly over the months, or I can do it proportionally based on the previous year. I'm just going to do evenly. So now it distributed it through the 12 months. Do the same here. And we'll go ahead and do this one proportionally to the previous year, so it's not even month to month for that line there since I selected that. I can export, and I'm just going to do that so I can show you an example of uploading a budget. So here's what I exported. I only have amounts in the top 3 lines since that's all I put in. And let's go back. There we go. Okay, so now I'm all back to 0. So let's say instead of typing things in manually, I have maybe something that I've exported like I just did, or maybe I started in Excel creating my budget. Now I just want to upload it. I can load records from file. I'm going to take the file, in this case one that I just exported. It's already mapping, but if I hadn't just exported it and maybe the columns in Excel don't quite match what's here in Acumatica, I would need to manually specify the mapping. So I just brought it in. Now I'm going to go ahead and save this. And now I'll show you how to release a budget. If I go to the release budget screen, say I only have a few things here with actual amounts, since that's all I did, but this is where you go to, you can release specific lines, or you can just release all to release the entire budget. Well, that's all for now. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you found it helpful. Please feel free to check out our other content on YouTube or contact me if you have any questions about the video or Acunet services.